as they come in. I'm going to go ahead and press record so no one gets scared of the loud noise if it makes one. One moment. It looks like it already is recording.
It did give the little notice.
It did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't see that. So great. I think Desi might have done that. Desi, thank you for starting the recording. I appreciate it. Okay, she's got it. She's got it. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Britton Slagle. I am the founder and executive director of KarmaSue. Our mission is to support Coloradan families enduring companion animal cancer through education, counseling, and financial assistance. We'd like to thank you for attending our education workshop today. If you're interested in watching any of our previous workshops, please visit our YouTube channel. If you have any questions or would like to connect with us directly, you can do so by sending us an email at admin@karmasue.org. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this workshop. If you have any questions as we go along, please enter them in the chat box. I will moderate the chat and provide your questions to our facilitator at the end. Also, please keep yourself on mute to avoid background noise. We are recording this workshop and will provide you with the video in the coming days. Today's workshop is titled How Health Affects Behavior. Our special guest facilitator is Ursa Acree of Behavior Vets of Colorado. Ursa is a certified dog behavior consultant, certified professional dog trainer, and fear-free certified trainer. She founded Canis Major Training in 2016, which operated as the premier training, board and train, and daycare facility of Denver, Colorado through 2021. In addition to her experience working with private clients, Ursa has extensive experience working with animals in need. She was the behavior manager for the Kentucky Humane Society from 2007 to 2010, and the behavior manager at the Dumb Friends League from 2010 to 2013. Ursa co-hosted the Canine Conversations podcast from 2018 to 2021 and has been featured in the Mile High Dog magazine, Dumb Friends League Pet Tales, and Kentucky Humane Society's Paw Street Journal. And I just realized that I did not advance my slides. There we go. Please excuse me as I'm using two screens today.
Me too.
Thank you for your understanding. All right. So we'd like to thank you again for attending our workshop today. As we conclude, we'll send you a brief evaluation via the chat box. If you can, please complete this as it helps us to understand what you're looking for in the workshops for the future. So thank you all for attending today, and Ursa, I'll hand things over to you now.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to get us started off by sharing my screen. Can everybody see that okay? Does it look right, Britt?
It's loading right now.
Oh, got it. Okay. You let me know when it.
I will.
I wonder if, hang on one second. It wouldn't be a presentation without at least, you know, a little.
We're gonna get
a
the
little
keys
snag,
out
right?
first, and then we don't have any later. That's how that goes. There we
How's
go.
that? Good?
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Got it.
All right, love it. Well, thank you guys for coming. As Britt mentioned, this presentation is about the intersection of health and behavior. You know, traditionally, it's something that was thought of as two separate things, but they're actually really closely related and intertwined. And in my practice, in my job as a behavior consultant for a veterinary behavior practice, it's something that we don't even really think of as separate anymore. So this is what we're going to focus on in this presentation and kind of how these two intersect and affect one another. As Britt said, I am the training manager for the Colorado training team for behavior vets, as well as a certified dog behavior consultant. You're going to see this little guy. This is my dog, Nico. I was telling Britt that he was on my mind a lot while I put this presentation together because I lost him last November after a protracted period of health issues, which unfortunately I never got a clear diagnosis on. But you'll see a lot of pictures of him in this presentation. He was a Malamute Husky Chow mix who had dwarfism, and his name was Nico. And he was my once in a lifetime, 1 in a million dog. So as I said, he was on my mind a lot. So he'll come up quite a bit. So at the end of this presentation, my hope is that you're going to have an understanding of how health and behavior can be related and how health can affect your pet's behavior. And, you know, I'm going to refer a lot to dogs. I specialize in dogs. I have worked with a lot of cats. I've worked with horses. I've worked with chickens, goats, pigs, other fowl. But dogs are my bread and butter. It's by far what I have the most experience with. And so while a lot of these concepts can translate to other animals or other species, I'm going to be specifically zooming in on dog behavior. So just to let you know kind of what to expect. So how health and behavior are related, what signs to look for that you may be seeing some behavior issues that are being caused or exacerbated by a health problem. Some tools to manage health-related behavior issues. Understand how other pets in your household may be affected and how you can help them. Recognize basic body language signals, so just some basic signs that your dog is uncomfortable or experiencing some pain or needing space. And then understand beginning cooperative care exercises and concepts. And I'll talk a little bit more about what cooperative care is when we get to that section. So everything has a disclaimer. And my disclaimer is that I am a dog behavior consultant, not a veterinarian. So that means that if you suspect your dog or your pet is experiencing a health issue or pain or discomfort, your first step should be to consult with your DVM and, you know, obviously try to figure out what's going on there. But I don't want you to construe anything in this presentation as veterinary advice or a diagnostic tool. We're purely going to be looking at the behavior side. That is my domain, not the medical side. As I said, they're very closely intertwined, but I'm not qualified to diagnose or treat medical issues. So just a quick overview. So, you know, why do we look at health as a behavior consultant, or when we're talking about behavior, why would we look at health? Modern trainers follow a code of ethics called the Humane Hierarchy. And the Humane Hierarchy is a roadmap for treatment. And it basically just tells us what we should be looking at first. It's almost like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're familiar with that model, where it talks about what things children need in their lives to be mentally and physically healthy. And so the big stuff is down at the bottom, and then as you go up, it's built as a pyramid. As you go up a step, then there's the kind of the next phase of needs, and then all the way at the top are the things that are nice to have, but we don't necessarily have to survive and thrive. And so the Humane Hierarchy is similar in structure in that it guides us to start with the low-hanging fruit first and the least invasive treatments first. And by least invasive, I mean from a behavior standpoint. And health is at the very bottom. So health and environment are at the very bottom, meaning it's the thing that we look at first. And the reason is, if a dog doesn't have their basic physical needs met, a behavior treatment plan is not likely to be successful. So if a dog is sick, if they are lacking proper food, if they're lacking water, all the basic needs for their physical health, it's unlikely that we're going to get the prognosis that we want from a behavior treatment plan. And so we always look at that first. And in the past, and I've been in the field about 21 years now, and I would say in the past, it was very common for trainers and consultants to pick up on really overt signs of health issues. So the dog is limping, or the dog is, you know, their eyes are visibly weeping, or they have, you know, overt signs of pain. And I think we've gotten a lot better now at recognizing more covert signs that maybe something is off and we're not really sure exactly what it is, but that there's a suspicion that there is a health issue that it could be contributing to whatever behavior issues we're seeing. And I think that we're looking at that more and more, and especially in our practice at behavior vets, we're an integrated practice of veterinarians with behavior training and behavior consultants. And so as a team, we look at that entire picture of the pet's health and their behavior and how they're working together, or not working together in some cases. And the reason that's important is because, generally speaking, pain or discomfort or just not feeling good is going to lower a pet's threshold for what they can tolerate. And so in behavior, we talk about a threshold as kind of where an animal goes from being okay to not okay. And so in any specific situation, they can be triggered to react in a way that we would consider inappropriate, although all behavior is appropriate from the standpoint of the one that's behaving, right? They're behaving to get something or to get away from something. But the threshold is where that inappropriate behavior starts to occur. And so I think all of us can relate to the idea that when you're painful or ill or not feeling well, your tolerance for things gets much lower. I feel like that's probably a universal concept that requires no further explanation. And I'm sure that we've seen it in our pets as well. But so we take that into consideration with behavior, because if a pet is dealing with pain or discomfort, we can generally safely assume that their tolerance for things that are triggering their behavior is going to be lower. And there is a phenomenon called trigger stacking. And so trigger stacking is where someone, a human or a non-human animal, experiences multiple different triggers that on their own wouldn't necessarily cause a reaction, but when they're all experienced together, they sort of add up and push that animal over threshold. And again, we experience a lot of these same things in our lives. So I think we can probably all relate to, an example of a day where just everything goes wrong, right? And you wake up, and from the moment you wake up, you're dealing with unexpected, fires that you have to put out, or maybe your own health issues, or maybe things with your family or work. And if you have one of those days where you kind of feel like nothing's going your way, you're not feeling good, and then you get pulled over for speeding on the way home, it might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and you might just have a meltdown. But if you have a day where things are going great, and maybe you get a raise at work, and maybe your back that usually hurts you is feeling bad today, and you get pulled over on the way home, and you go, well, it happens, no big deal. And you can kind of brush it off. And so trigger stacking is something that we have to take into consideration when we look at behavior, because it can affect how an animal behaves. And one of those triggers is pain or discomfort. So if those are present, it can lower a pet's threshold for dealing with other things. So maybe they're also afraid of strangers if they're having a day where they're feeling bad or feeling uncomfortable, and a stranger appears, maybe they're less able to be able to tolerate that in a healthy way than they would on a day where they're feeling good. Another thing that's important to understand about pain and behavior is that behavior that starts out as reflexive, so, ooh, that hurts, over time that can become learned. And whenever I talk about this, I think of a personal example, which is that probably 4 years ago, I know it was pre-pandemic, my husband and I were hiking on the coast of Southern California on some big beach rocks, and I slipped and I landed, all of my weight landed on my right knee, and I fractured my tibial plateau. And it was something that didn't hurt while I was standing or walking, but I couldn't put any weight on my knee. I couldn't lean on my knee or kneel on that knee for probably 2 years afterwards. It was extremely sensitive. And now it hasn't been painful for probably 1.5 years or 2 years, but I'm still really cautious about leaning on that knee. So I think twice before I kneel on that knee and put all my weight on that knee, even though I can do it and it doesn't hurt. So that behavior that was at first reflexive, ooh, I don't want to do that because that feels bad, has now become a learned behavior for me. So I do it even though the pain is no longer there. I still protect that knee because the reflexive behavior has sort of turned into this learned behavior that I do. So animals can be like that too. And I've seen a lot of examples with dogs where maybe they have an orthopedic condition that causes them pain in their hips or their knees, and that makes them a little grumbly when they're handled or when you sit next to them or whatever. And then once the pain is managed, we will often see them still be sensitive, even though we can guess just by observing them that they're not feeling as ouchy. They might still react as if they are, because that's such a learned defensive behavior. So that's something that's really important to understand, that just because we've managed the physical condition doesn't necessarily mean that the behavior will go away right away, or sometimes ever, without behavior treatment. It's also important to understand that pain can manifest in really unexpected ways. So, I have lots of cases of clients with dogs whose behavior or whose health issue was not necessarily directly related to the behaviors, the maladaptive behaviors that we were seeing. And so, because unfortunately our dogs can't tell us when they're not feeling good or what's not feeling good, sometimes it can take a little bit of troubleshooting and untangling to figure out, like, okay, well, we're seeing this behavior, but it turns out it's this health problem, and the two are not directly related. And again, I think that's something that we can relate to when we're not feeling good. Sometimes that can cause us to behave in ways that are not typical for us, but might not have anything to do with how we're not feeling good. So like if you have a headache, you don't usually walk around holding your head, but it might affect how you interact with people, your tolerance for things that you would normally be okay with, etc. And unfortunately, I wish we could talk to dogs. Maybe someday we can actually talk to them and ask them what's going on. It would make things a lot easier, although they might have some things to say that we don't want to hear. But and then the last thing is that pain and discomfort isn't always obvious. And I see this quite a bit. So dogs are first really good, and animals in general, I think, are really good at being stoic. And of course, we've probably all heard that that's adaptive. In the wild, you don't want to show that you're sick or injured because that makes you vulnerable to predators. And that does seem to be a carryover into domestic pets, that they tend to be stoic when they're not feeling well. And a lot of the time we don't know anything is wrong until it's really, really wrong. And I have certainly experienced that in my pets as well. What I have found, and the pattern that I have noticed in behavior training, is that a lot of behavior issues, even though all dogs and all animals are individuals, a lot of typical behavior issues will present in very similar ways. And sometimes when there's something that's just off, like, okay, this is presenting in a way that's not typical. I've seen hundreds of cases of this, and this one is weird or different, or it's what we would call idiosyncratic, where we can't really make a connection between the environment and the behavior. Those are some signs that I'll look for to go, okay, maybe there's something internal going on. But it's not always what we would think of when we think of a sick or a painful animal. So it's not always like, oh, they're limping, or we can clearly see this injury or this lesion or whatever. Sometimes it's just, and I'm so hesitant to say things like this because behavior is a science, and I'm a very scientific, literal person, but sometimes it's a sense where it's like, this is just off. This doesn't seem typical. And, as pet owners, I think we know our pets better than anyone. And there have been many times where I've worked with clients where they'll say, yeah, I started seeing this behavior and it's just really weird. Like it changed suddenly, or it's atypical for my dog. And it's funny because sometimes clients will attribute it to something, like they've decided they know why. And that's not always right. Like they'll say, oh, well, it's because my dog is dominant or whatever. And, we know that dominance framework isn't really a thing, but I always want to listen to them when they say something's off, because that typically means that there's something going on that we are sort of aware of or tracking, but we may not be able to describe the signs or describe why we're thinking that. And so because it's not always obvious, we do have to look out for those little subtle signs that like something's just off with our pet, and really pay attention to those. So I want to go through just some basic body language signals because these are really important. This is how our dogs communicate to us what they're feeling. And almost all dogs that I've worked with display at least some, if not all of these body language signals, but they can be really subtle. And sometimes if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't see them. And so I have had people in the past tell me like, oh, the dog just snapped at me out of nowhere. And it's almost never out of nowhere, with very few exceptions, but it's almost never out of nowhere. It's usually that the dog was giving some signals that they just didn't know to look for. So the person wasn't aware what that meant. The dog was trying to communicate, but we're speaking a different language, and that person doesn't speak dog yet. So I want to go over just some of these briefly so that we all are speaking kind of the same language when we talk about behavior issues and what our dogs are trying to communicate when they're not comfortable or when they're feeling fearful. So some basic signs of fear discomfort. And I want to point out that a few of these are going to be out of context. It's when they happen out of context. So for example, lip licking. A dog who has just eaten or drank or who's drooling and panting is probably going to lick their lips. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not feeling well or that they're fearful or feeling threatened. It's when it happens out of context. So for example, we can probably all picture our dog sitting at the vet and the vet leaning over to put the stethoscope on them and maybe the dog licking their lips. That's out of context. So some of these are going to be when they happen out of context, we can kind of take that as a sign that the dog might be feeling nervous. Some of them are self-explanatory, so body stiffening. I'm always looking for that, and that's a big sign that the dog is tensing up and getting nervous. Whale eye is something, and I've got a picture over here on the side of my other dog, Zip, demonstrating whale eye really well. And it's basically when, so normally we don't see our dog's sclera, the whites of their eyes. When you do, and with some exceptions, so dogs like pugs or Pekingese who have protruding eyes, you see the sclera more often, but most dogs you don't. When you see it, what that means is that the dog is looking at something but like recoiling, turning their head away. And it's because they want to keep their eye on the thing that they're worried about, but they also want to move away from it at the same time. And we call it whale eye. In Zip's case, so we were camping. She was really afraid of thunderstorms for a while. And we were camping out near Marble, Colorado, and a huge storm rolled in. So we took cover in the car. We were car camping. And that's my husband's leg that she's hiding under. And she was basically, every time the thunder rolled, she would go like this. She would kind of look in the direction of it, but move away from it. So great example there of whale eye. I mentioned lip licking. Head turn is one that I see very often in a lot of dogs, and it's exactly what it sounds like. And it's the dog trying to move away from something. So sometimes before they move their entire body, they'll just kind of turn their head as a kind of a way to say like, whoa, I really need some distance from that. Pursed lips and furrowed brow. Again, there's an analog of that in humans. It means that we're tense and we show it in our face. If you have a dog with big jowls or a dog with a wrinkly forehead, those might not be the signs that you look for because they're going to be hard to see. Yawning is another one. Again, that's a displacement behavior in humans. We yawn when we're anxious or nervous or feeling awkward. Escape behaviors are pretty obvious. And I always like to mention that sometimes I'll see dogs jumping on their people as a way to try to escape, like they're climbing you. It doesn't always mean that they're excited. And that, of course, is dependent on context. Airplane ears is when dogs and cats do this too. They kind of put their ears down and out to the side or back and out to the side. And then a tooth display, growling, and snapping or biting are all very clear signs of discomfort that I think all of us are familiar with or would recognize. I don't think anybody would have any trouble recognizing those. So I just wanted to briefly go through some pictures so that we know what we're looking at. So we've got a great example over here in the little beagle of like a whale eye. And she was actually an extremely friendly little girl, but she didn't like the camera in her face. So when I was taking a picture, she kind of did the big like back away and look, her eyes got wide. The one in the middle, I always laugh because that's my dog Zip. And Zip loves me and I love her and she's really comfortable with me. But I just take this picture, I slung my arm around her and she didn't really appreciate that. And so that's an example of a lip lick to show that she's kind of nervous about it. But when people see that picture, they're like, oh, look at her, she's so cute with her tongue out. And like, she really, I love her and I think she's adorable. But when I look at that picture, I kind of go like, oh, she's not super comfortable with me, like giving her a bear hug right then. And then we've got a little pity over here on the end, showing us, again, a good example of whale eye. A few more there's Zip again in the middle with a yawn. Again, she does not like the camera in her face. Over here on the left, Eli doing a great example of a lip lick. A lot of dogs don't like to be photographed. So I think with my next dog, I'm gonna teach them that a tennis ball comes out when the camera comes out. And then over here on the end, this little black dog, this is my friend's dog, Cairo. And you can see he's kind of got his little brow furrowed there. He always looks a little bit worried. He's a very anxious dog. And so you can see he's got that little valley right up here in between his forehead, or in the middle of his forehead. And that's a good example of a furrowed brow. He also doesn't like having his picture taken. It's easy to get examples of uncomfortable dogs because most dogs I know don't like the camera in their face. And so you pull it out and they automatically look like they're just being really mistreated. Taco, the white cattle dog over here on the left, great example of like some airplane ears. He's kind of got some pursed lips there. Again, doesn't like the camera in his face. We had just gotten back from a hike in the snow and he got little balls of ice in his toes and he was feeling pretty painful right there. He was trying to lick it out because he refuses to wear boots. And then, sorry, let's go back. Jasper, this Malinois, a great example. You can even see from the side this furrowed brow and airplane ears. So he's kind of like holding his ears back because he was a little uncomfortable with whatever was going on in that moment. Zeus on the left, airplane ears, whale eye, didn't like being in his face with the camera. And his lips are a little tight. He's a little bit more of a jelly dog, but you can see he's kind of closed his mouth as a way to say like, oh, I'm feeling tense right now. And then there's Taco again with, look how stiff his body is. Like his legs are totally straight. His tail is tense and being held up. His ears are out to the side. His jaw is tight. He does not appreciate the impromptu bath that he's getting. And he's trying to say that with his body language. So some good examples there. And then we've got Zip doing a tongue flick and blinking again. And then over here on the other side, this little doxy with a very clear, I'm not comfortable with this tooth display. So those are just some sort of basic signs of dog body language that I think it's really important for anyone who lives with a dog to understand. Because if we miss our dog's basic signs of communication that they're trying to use when they tell us, I'm not feeling good, don't do that, that hurts, that's scary. Not only are we doing them a disservice, but we're putting ourselves at risk as well, because when they can't communicate what they need with these sort of lower level signs, they end up escalating to get their point across. So one of the things that I get asked very often is, how do you respond appropriately when your dog shows signs of discomfort? And that's up to and including this growling, showing teeth, and snapping. Like, what should we do? It used to be that people would sort of knee-jerk react by saying like, oh, we need to tell the dog that that's not appropriate. They need to know that they can't get away with growling or showing teeth or snapping. And what we now know, what modern dog training takes into account is, again, this is all communication. So this is our dog trying to tell us, I'm really worried right now, or I'm not feeling good about this right now. And they're using their behavior to try to get distance from something that is unpleasant for them, whether it's painful or uncomfortable or just scary. They're using those behaviors to tell us like, I need space. I need whatever's happening right now to stop. And so what we need to do, instead of responding in a way that is punishment focused and trying to suppress these behaviors, what we need to do is take it as communication. We don't want to punish that communication. We want our dogs to understand we're listening, we hear you, and you can use these more mild behaviors to get what you need without having to escalate to more severe behavior. And it's really, really, really important that our dogs understand that. There is a concept called the ladder of aggression, and I'll show you guys that here in a second. Actually, we'll go ahead and move to that one. The ladder of aggression is a concept that aggressive behavior always starts as body language signals, right? So all the stuff we just talked about. So the lip licks and the head turns and the whale eye and whatever. And if those things don't work, the dog keeps going up the ladder until they get what they need, until they get their point across. And so at the very top of that ladder is a bite. And that's what we all want to avoid from our pets, is being bitten or having them bite someone else. So it's, again, really important that we help our dogs understand that we hear these lower level signals and we're going to respond to them by taking the pressure off. And so that could be in situations where there's a novel stimulus that they're worried about, a stranger, a new dog. It could be in situations where we have to handle or treat them. It could be in situations where they're worried about a resource. Anytime we start to see these signals that they're getting uncomfortable, we need to go, okay, I hear you. We're gonna back out of this scenario so that you feel comfortable, and you don't feel like you have to yell to get your point across. We want to whisper, not yell. So anytime you see these signs from your dog, the first thing to do is stop and give the dog space. So no matter what it is you're doing, again, if it's care or treatment or putting the dog in a new situation or whatever, we want to stop what is causing the body language and kind of back them out of that situation, give them space. And so specifically, if we're thinking about things that are related to health, so with pets that aren't feeling good, with pets that are sick or injured that require treatment, sometimes we might feel like, well, we have to do this, regardless of how loud my dog says, don't do it. It's for their own good. And I absolutely empathize with that. And I have been in that position as well. But our pets don't understand that it's for their own good. All they know is, oh, well, the people in my life that I trust are doing something that's scary to me, and I really, really, really need them to stop. So stopping when they ask us to can build trust. And then just sort of thinking about, am I able to do this in a different way? So am I able to get my pet the treatment they need in a way that doesn't cause them to feel this way and doesn't cause them to communicate that they need me to stop doing it. If you can do it in a different way, I always say you can't train it when you need it. So there's no way to train your dog to do something at the time that you need them to do it. So sometimes I'll use tactics like distracting them. A great example is my dog Zip. She's older, she's 13, and she no longer really loves having her nails trimmed. And I think it has a lot to do with she's got arthritis in her front legs. And so I let her lay down while we're trimming nails. So she lays down on her belly and she gets a plate of squeeze cheese. Instead of me like trying to hold her down or hold her paw up or something like that, she gets into the position where she's comfortable. She gets a big plate of cheese that she gets to lick on. I trim the nails, the cheese goes away, and we're done. So sometimes you can use distraction or management to get done what you need to get done while you're also training the dog to allow that procedure or allow that handling or treatment. And so it's important to identify in any situation where the dog is struggling, what skills do they need to be able to be successful or do better? So we're going to stop in the moment where they're telling us they're not comfortable, and then we're going to back up and go, okay, what does my dog need to be able to do successfully to feel better about this interaction or treatment or whatever it is? And that's a big simplification. So I know I'm sort of being very general, but it is a very general approach that then you kind of dig in for each specific scenario or a dog and go, okay, well, here are the details. But the first thing we should think is, what do I want my dog to do instead? And then that's when we can start working on that. With any behavior issue that we suspect is being exacerbated by a medical issue, veterinary intervention is crucial. And so just like I mentioned earlier with the Humane Hierarchy, if there's a medical problem that is underlying, that's exacerbating or even causing the behavior, we're not likely to make any progress on it if that's not at least managed and ideally treated. And if it goes untreated, it's likely to continue to make the behavior problems worse because your pet is just going to continue to sensitize to that feeling. So I'm just still feeling bad or I'm still hurting, but these environmental things that trigger that feeling are continuing to happen. And it's just this spiral of them getting more and more sensitive about whatever that is. I always like to mention that comforting a pet that is fearful is not going to reinforce their fear. So that's sort of an old wives' tale. It's like, don't comfort your pet when they're worried or fearful because it's going to reinforce the fear. You cannot reinforce fear. Fear is an aversive emotion, and animals and humans don't feel it voluntarily. Humans kind of do, I guess. We go on roller coasters and things like that, but that's a whole different story. We're way more complex. But generally speaking, animals feel fear as a way to alert their nervous system that something is dangerous, right? There's a potential threat. And they don't do that voluntarily. So it's not a reinforcing feeling, and there's nothing that we can do to actually reinforce that. It's not going to make the fear worse. I do always say, though, it might not help, especially if you have a pet that's painful or sensitive. Doing like a lot of physical handling or petting or cuddling may not feel good and could actually trigger behavior, aggressive behavior if it makes them feel bad. And then, as I said, distraction is okay. So, if we're speaking about pets with medical issues where we need to treat them, or even, older pets that are sensitive to normal handling, it's okay to use distraction to get something done if you can do it successfully. And I actually think that can be a perfectly fine long-term strategy as long as it continues to work. I want to talk for just a minute about managing a household with pets with health issues and how that can affect the behavior of sort of the pets as a group. And so these are my two guys again. Oops, we're going backwards. So there are a number of different ways in which your other pets might be affected by a pet with a health problem. The big one that I think most of us see is a change in relationship. And so there are a couple of ways that can manifest. One is that often, and I probably see this the most, the other pets in the household get less leeway from the pet that's sick or injured. And what I mean by that is that they don't get the grace that they maybe normally get if they like bump into them or lay down next to them or try to steal their food, or even just normal interactions like soliciting play. They may get a more sensitive response than they're used to. And again, that's for all the reasons we talked about earlier. The pet doesn't feel good. They're more defensive because they predict that interactions might be painful or uncomfortable. So they're going to start asking for space sooner. And so again, I see that really often in either households where we've got a sick or injured pet or an older pet that's starting to have some age-related health problems, again, like arthritis. They just don't get as much leeway as they used to. And so sometimes the other pets are like, whoa, okay, sorry. Now I know, I'll keep my distance. Sometimes they escalate. Sometimes they don't take kindly to those communications, and they're like, oh yeah, and it can escalate into a conflict between the pets. And so it's really important to protect your pet's space. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, and look for those signs that maybe like, ooh, my one pet who is now dealing with this health issue they have a shorter temper than they used to use kind of an anthropomorphic phrase. They're not as tolerant of these interactions from the other pets as they used to be. And that's important to note because we want to make sure we have to know what's going on. We have to see these changes in order to help our pets through them. Sometimes we'll also see a change in dynamics, and I see this less frequently, but it still happens where like the healthy pets will go, aha, well, I can get away with a lot more now. So like I used to be when I tried to steal my siblings, favorite chew toy, they would tell me off. But now like I can get in there and get it and get away before they get a snap in. So you might start to see that change in dynamics where the healthy pets start seeing little loopholes where they can take advantage of things that they didn't used to be able to. And again, I want to caution against the idea that don't put too much stock into the dominance hierarchy framework. The scientist who popularized that idea has actually recanted, and it's not as useful to explain behavior as we once thought it was. So most behaviors in our pet animals are not motivated by a desire for status. It's motivated by, I want that food, or I want to get away from this scary thing, or I want a comfy place to sleep, or whatever. And so when I say a change in dynamics and pets taking advantage of maybe a limited mobility in another pet, it's literally just like, oh, well, it used to be that I couldn't steal that from them, but now I can't, so I'm gonna do it. But we'll see that often as health problems progress and maybe limit what the sick or injured pet is capable of doing, or limit how they interact with the other pets in the household. Other ways that the rest of your pets might be affected: resources are limited, right? Time, money, attention, our emotional bandwidth. those are all finite things for most of us. And so, I can, a personal example that I'm not super proud of, but when Nico was sick, we were going to the vet once or twice a week for a couple of months doing treatments and diagnostics and trying to figure out what was wrong with him. And when he passed away, when we had him euthanized, I knew that Zip was getting a little stiff and that she needed to go to the vet because I suspected she had arthritis. It took me about a month and a half before I was able to make that appointment because I was so emotionally drained from dealing with Nico's health issues. I literally, the thought of going back to the vet was so overwhelming to me that I was like, I can't deal with that right now. And so again, I look back and I go, I shouldn't have done that. She's my responsibility too. But I'm human. I try to give myself grace for that. And, I recognize that like her life was affected by Nico's health in an indirect way because I was focusing so much time and attention on him and trying to find out what was wrong and if we could fix it, that, she kind of fell by the wayside for a little while. And unfortunately, that's just sometimes the reality of living in a household where you have a pet with a significant health problem. So, we just want to try to be aware of that. And so if we know that that can happen, we can think about things like, okay, well, can I make some changes to help my other pet get the things that they need? Can I tag in a friend or a family member or whatever to help me meet their needs? And then the other big thing is change in routine. So a lot of the time we're going to be spending so much time on the sick pet, or maybe there's structure where there wasn't before because they need medication every so often. And so that can affect the other pets as well if it's something that they're not used to. Some suggestions for managing your household. We want to give them plenty of space from each other. So especially on days where the sick pet is not feeling well, they're probably going to need extra space for all the reasons we mentioned earlier. They might be more sensitive. They might not have the tolerance for the normal interactions that they have. And especially during times where there's like a lot of activity or movement or jostling, like during feeding, during handling to administer medication or treatment, those are definitely times where we want to keep the other pets at a distance so that we don't give the opportunity for a conflict, because that obviously never makes anybody feel good. I like to teach basic interrupter cues. And so it's sort of like the nice version of no. There's a great video that I'll have Britt send out in the follow-up notes by a colleague of mine, Lisa Malinix, and she teaches basically just a word to sort of tap her dog on the shoulder and go, hey, could you stop what you're doing and check in with me? And so I love to teach those things as a way to de-escalate things that I see might be going south. So like if I see my pet who's not feeling well is starting to get a little grumpy and starting to maybe move towards like a big correction or an escalation, then I can just go, hey, bacon, or whatever, and they kind of turn towards me and disengage. You'll want to keep things low key for your pets. So when animals aren't feeling well, it's not the time to do like your big hikes or barbecues or, dog park or that sort of thing. That all of those things can contribute to that phenomenon of trigger stacking. So, when you're not feeling well and then you have to expend energy doing this other stuff, that drains you to deal with everything else. So we want to try to keep things low key for pets that aren't feeling well. Spending time with pets individually, and that kind of ties back to that, resources are limited. So we want to make sure that we're not leaving out our other pets in the household who also still need, exercise and interaction and attention and so forth. And then sometimes I find increasing enrichment can be really helpful. So by enrichment, I mean anything that is interactive for your pet, like a puzzle toy or, toys that they can pull apart. Anything that's like a challenge for them. And so as appropriate. So sick pets may not feel like doing that stuff, or they may only feel like doing a limited amount of it. But enrichment for all the pets in the household is a great idea, whatever is appropriate for them, because it can kind of keep them busy and engage them with less effort on your part. So it's pretty easy to give everybody like a little puzzle ball or a stuffed Kong or a meal in a maze bowl, like a puzzle bowl. And that can help wear them out and engage them and keep them enriched without you necessarily having to spend a lot of extra time. Okay, so I want to go over some cooperative care, just the basic principles, and show you some videos. Cooperative care is a concept that is widely used in modern dog training. And it basically just means that we're going to teach our pets to cooperate in the care that we need to give to them. So to do it voluntarily. And I have to just talk about these pictures really quick, because especially this one of Eli, the tan and black dog. I've been working with Eli for several years now for a variety of different behavior issues. And one of them is veterinary handling. So veterinarian, just basic husbandry. So including nail trimming. He really does not like to have his nails trimmed. And recently, using cooperative care, we trimmed all of his nails in one sitting, and he wagged his tail. You can even see his tail wagging in the background. And you'll see Eli in some of the videos. And as we trimmed each nail, Mom picked them up and kind of set them aside so that she could put them in the trash. She didn't want to have like nail trimmings everywhere. And we just thought it was so funny that he was kind of sitting there wagging his tail at all of his little nail trimmings. And so I took a picture with him being so proud of his nail trimming experience. And then we've got the little whippet over here on the side, a chin target, and then a client of mine, Jack, wearing his muzzle. All facets of cooperative care that I'm going to, oh no, my Apple mouse goes crazy sometimes. So all cooperative care concepts that I want to cover. So it's a husbandry approach that is largely used and kind of first emerged in zoos and wildlife centers. And the reason is, when you're dealing with exotic animals like a rhino or a tiger or a chimpanzee, you can't force those animals to submit to care. You can tranquilize them and then give care, but you can't hold them down and do it. You can't restrain them and do it. Maybe with some species, you can get away with it once, but then the next time they see you coming, it's not going to happen. And so what zookeepers realized was, we have to teach these animals to participate in their care willingly, so that it's not traumatic for them, so that it's not risky for us. And so we don't have to tranquilize them every time, which is not good for them. It's not good for their welfare. So that's kind of the origin of cooperative care. And what we've found over the years is that it works just as well for pet animals, works brilliantly well for pet animals, because domestic animals have been bred and selected for thousands of years to be cooperative, right? That's the whole point. And so it's a concept that works very, very well with the pets that we share our lives with. So the idea is that instead of doing it to them, we're doing it with them, right? So we're cooperating together to get the care done. And it's something that I think is so important for every pet to learn at least some aspects of it before we think we need it. So, you know, if we're already in a situation with a sick pet, obviously we're in it, right? We can't be proactive necessarily in those scenarios, but there are still some things we can do to help make it easier on them, and help them learn how to participate voluntarily in care instead of feeling like you have to do it to them. And why does this matter? So, you know, I hear sometimes people will say like, well, it's for their own good. Like, I know that they don't like it, but it's for their own good. They have to get the medicine, they have to get the shot, they have to get the whatever. And that's fine. And I understand that. And I know that it's for their own good, and we can't really help them understand that. But allowing them to participate willingly in care increases their welfare. It makes things predictable. And as we all know, when things are predictable, they're not scary, right? When we know what's going to happen, we don't feel anxious, we feel safe. And it gives them choice and agency. And we have lots of research now to show that increasing choice, increasing an animal's sense of agency, or the idea that they have a choice, that they can use their behavior to control their outcome, increases their emotional and mental welfare. And I think everyone who has a pet would say that they care about the welfare of their pet. And this is one way to increase that welfare in a really significant way. It also increases compliance. So like I said, if you make an animal do it, you're going to get away with it once, maybe twice, but then you're going to have to chase them down. You're going to have to sit on top of them. There's going to be a fight. You might get bitten. If they are doing it willingly, they're choosing to do it, then there's no conflict there. There's no compliance issue. They're doing it. We don't have to make them do it. That increases safety. Again, you're not going to get bitten. You're not going to accidentally stab them in the eye with the ear medication or whatever it is, or quick their toenail because they tried to yank away. It increases everyone's safety. So obviously that's a huge goal, and something that we're really, really focused on at behavior vets is safety first. And so cooperative care is one way to increase that safety. And then it's more sustainable long-term for those reasons. So again, you can do it multiple times. As long as you're maintaining the training, you can continue to have the pet cooperate in their care for as long as you need them to. So you can't train it when you need it. I mentioned this earlier. This is a great example of using a happy hoodie on a dog. And a happy hoodie is a sleeve that goes over their ears to help reduce noise. So it can be helpful for reactivity in veterinary handling scenarios to kind of muffle other noise from around the clinic, a lot of different applications. And so we're working on teaching this dog Rue to wear a happy hoodie, and mom just kind of popped it on her. And she was like, you can tell from her face, she was like, no, thank you. The big eyes and the tight lips. So you can't teach your dog to allow you to give an injection while you're actually having to give the injection. We have to do it systematically. So we have to start with a teeny tiny little piece of the behavior and then work our way up. So if you think that you're going to need a behavior, you'll want to start on it ASAP. So you'll want to start teaching it well in advance of where you need it. If you have to give the care while you're training, you can expect that it will take longer, because we'll get 2 steps forward. Okay, my dog is comfortable with me pinching their scruff to give the shot, but then I actually later have to give the shot, and that's going to be a little scary. So we might take a little step back, and then we'll do some more training and take 2 steps forward, and then we have to give the shot again. It's going to be a little step back. I've found that it can help to train in a completely separate context. So if we're teaching a dog to tolerate a shot or ear medication or paw exam or whatever, teaching it in a totally separate context from where it actually happens. So maybe you give the shot or the eye medication or whatever by their food bowl before you do dinner, but then we're going to train in, the back bedroom with the door shut and some music on. And so that sometimes can help them separate the actual thing from the thing that you're training and get comfortable with the training more quickly. Excuse me. So to get started with cooperative care, and I have some videos that I want to show you guys. I'm a little behind on my timing. So Britton, are we okay? Saying we can watch video. Okay, so we might take a little of the Q&A time, which it seems like we're okay on that. So, all right. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to choose the relevant behaviors that you need. So what do I need my dog to do? Do I need them to tolerate getting an injection? Do I need them to tolerate me looking in their ears? Do I need them to tolerate me examining their feet? Whatever it is, you're going to choose the relevant behavior. And then generally we're going to train what we call a baseline or an opt-in or a start button behavior. And so what that means is that we're going to ask the dog, okay, get in position, get ready, right? So that could be, I want you to lay on this mat and look forward, or I want you to rest your chin in my hand or on my lap. They can look different for different care. So for ears and eyes and face stuff, I love to teach dog a chin rest. But for something else, we might want to teach them to just lay down calmly. And so what we're going to do is we're going to teach them that when they hold this position for a duration of time, they're going to be reinforced for it. So we're going to reward them. And then that's generally going to be with food. Most dogs are pretty easy to work with, to train with food. So you hold the position, and then we're going to start to do the behaviors surrounding the care. So while my dog is holding the position, maybe it's the chin rest, I might touch the side of their head. And if they back out of that chin rest, I'm going to take my hands away and go, okay, we need a break. That's just fine. And then I'm going to offer them to come back to the chin rest, and I might touch the side of their head again. They know that they're going to be reinforced for staying in that chin rest. And so if they stay there while I touch, we're going to reward for that. If they back away again, I'm going to go, okay, cool. You need a break. That's fine. And so what we're doing is we're teaching them that instead of escalating, instead of using aggression to say, hey, stop that, they can just go, oh, please don't for a second. Okay, so they can back away. So if we think back to that picture that I had of the chimpanzee getting the shot in their arm, the handler was separated by a wire gate, like a wire fence. And the chimpanzee was putting their shoulder up against the fence to get the shot. They can move away at any time. They can go, oh, you know what? I'm not ready. Okay, now I'm ready. Oh, you know what? Actually, I need a break. Okay, now I'm ready. Go ahead. And so we want to do the same thing with our pets. We want to say, like, are you ready? Are you going to jump up on your station to get your treatment? Or, oh, do you need to move away and take a quick break? And so by doing that, we can help them learn, A, they have the choice to opt in or out, which is going to help them feel more comfortable and more confident. B, they don't need to escalate to using aggression to get their point across, which keeps us and them safe. And C, getting treatment is super fun, right? So they have this big history of being trained in that position with the relevant handling. And then when it actually happens, it might be a little uncomfortable for a second, but they've done it 100 times where it's not uncomfortable and it's really reinforcing. So we're not going to ruin the behavior. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. No. Okay, there we go. So once we've taught the baseline behavior, we're going to look at what care we need to do, and we're going to break it down into the smallest possible steps. So again, if we're talking about giving an injection, you know, wherever it needs to go, we might start with like touching the injection site, and then we might tent the skin, and then we might use a paper clip to do a little poke. And all of that's going to happen many, many, many times. So we're not going to do one repetition of each. We're going to do tons of reps where we just touch the site, and tons where we tent the skin, and tons where we tent and poke. And at any time, if the pet says, "Oh, I don't like that, that's a little uncomfortable," they can just move out of position and we stop, right? So we go, okay, cool. You need a break? Are you ready to start again? And then if they get back into position, that's them saying, okay, go ahead, we can keep going. So you're going to start with the very first smallest step and then gradually add things in as they're successful. This is so fascinating to watch and participate in because it works really well if you do it right. And, you know, I think as evidenced by the fact that we can teach large, exotic, non-domestic animals to do this, it's a really, really effective method of not only just making it easier for us to care for our pets when they're sick or injured, or even if they just need basic care, but so much less stressful for a pet that already doesn't feel good. So if you already have a pet that's dealing with a chronic health problem, holding them down to do care is not going to improve their welfare, but teaching them to cooperate in their care makes it so much better for them and for you. And of course, I know that like as caretakers, we don't want to make our pets feel better, but we sometimes feel like we don't have a choice. I have to give them this medication. I have to give them this treatment. And so if we can do it in a way that is clearly more pleasant for them, that makes us feel better too. So let's look at some videos. So this first one is me and Eli, and we're doing a chin rest. So, oops, sorry about that. I'm just going to mute it because I kind of chatter to him. It's not really relevant and I don't want to clutter the airwaves. So Eli has had some experience with the chin rest, but he does try a couple different things. He's like, do you want my paw? And so I just sort of like take my hand away. And so what I'm doing here is working on some duration. I'm just doing a few reps of duration. So he held his chin in my hand for a few seconds, and then I marked and gave him some cheese. Here, I asked him for a chin target and I went to touch his shoulder and he went, oh, I'm not sure about that. And with Eli, it can sometimes be a mix of like, do you have cheese in that hand? So some of it is he's trying to figure out what I want and I'm letting him guess a little bit. But you'll see here in a second, I get my solid chin target. And then I get the chance to tent his skin. We're working on having him, there we go, good boy. And so right as I do it, I mark with his word super and then give him some cheese. So we're working on having him cooperate with veterinary care. He's really worried about basic husbandry, so getting injections, ear exams, eye exams, that sort of thing. So I'm gonna tent, yes, or super is his word, and then cheese. So you guys see, he held the position, which was him telling me, go ahead and do what you need to do. I'm opting in. And anytime he moved away, I took that as like, oh, I'm not ready yet. Okay, well, wait, that's fine. We'll wait until you're ready. And he's doing great with that. He's really come a long way, as is evidenced by his toenail collateral damage. Here's Eli again, and this is mom doing a chin rest. And then you might be able to see she touches his toe with the nail clippers. So I want you to watch that again because it happens really fast. Chin, he puts his chin in, he goes, okay, go ahead. She touches with the nail clippers and then he gets his cheese. And look at his tail. He's wagging his tail the whole time. He loves this. This is a dog that hated having his nails trimmed. He's thrilled. We use a muzzle when he's outside because he does have a history, a bite history with strangers. So in case someone were to walk up, we want to make sure that he's super safe. Oops. Oh no. There we go. Sorry, guys. Okay, so this is a little bit of a longer video and we'll just kind of forward through some parts. This is one of our trainers, Ferdy, who's working with a dog. Let me describe this first so you can hear it and then watch it. He's working with a dog that is in a shelter that he volunteers with, and he's teaching what we call the bucket game. And the bucket game is just a cooperative care exercise that teaches a dog to lay down and stare at a bucket as their opt-in behavior. So if they break eye contact, if they look away from the bucket, that's their, nope, I need a break. If they stare at the bucket, that's the opt-in. And so this is a couple of like just compilation clips of Ferdy working with this pup to teach them to look at the bucket. And then he adds in, I'm gonna just speed it up a tiny bit for time's sake. He adds in some handling and he will, so there he's got a little bit of handling. She kept her eyes on the bucket, so he rewarded her for that. So he's rewarding her for just looking at the bucket. And then when there's contact and she still looks at the bucket, she gets a treat. If she looks away from the bucket, he takes his hands away. So that's her way of saying, no, thanks, don't do that right now. So he takes his hand away. But now she stays looking at the bucket, so she gets her treat. And this is, I love this compilation because it's just so amazing to see what handling behaviors he can do with this dog. And she's still like, yeah, okay, we're good. You know what? I'm good. Keep going. And then occasionally she's like, oh, actually, hang on, give me a break. I'm not okay with that. And it's this beautiful communication of her using her body language to say, no, thanks, or I need a break, or I'm not so sure about that. And Ferdy going, I hear you. That's totally fine. I hear you. Are you ready now? And so she's got choice. She's got agency. She's not worried. She's not nervous. She's not being aggressive. Here he's trimming a nail and she went, oh, what are you doing? And he went, oh, sorry, we'll take a break. Are you ready to start again? Yep. Okay, good. This is another one of our trainers, Jamie, and she is working with her dog, Odie, to do a combination of chin rest and bucket game. So she's asking him to put his chin on the couch there and stare at the bowl or the bucket. And as long as he holds that position, she's going to reinforce. And she's using a clicker. I'll turn the sound on for this one. And then she's starting to add in what we call Predictor Queue. So she's telling him, hey, I'm going to touch you, or I'm going to move my hand, just so you know what's coming. And so if he stays in position while she does the behavior, he gets a click and a treat. And if he were to move away, she would take her hands away and go, oh, sorry, we can take a break. So now she's working on the scruff, tinting his scruff for, again, like an injection. And so she started to add in a poke and he went, oh my gosh, what are you doing? So she took her hands away. She went, okay, we can take a break. And now she's waiting for him to opt in again. Hand, poke, boom. So it just took a little moment for him to go, wait a second, that's different. What are you doing? And for her to go, you know what, that's fine. Take a second. When you're ready, we can start again. And he understands, okay, I'm opting back in so you can do that again. And I love how patient she is in this video too. She's really waiting for him to go, okay, I'm ready. And he's not ready yet, and that's totally fine. He has the choice. Do you want to try again? Okay. No, I don't know if I'm ready yet, actually. And so she went back to doing an easier one because he struggled a little bit there. So she went back a step and was like, okay, we're just gonna throw an easy one in so you can get back into the swing of it. Oops. Here's Nico. This was an example of a very beginning cooperative care exercise. I wanted him to learn to let me grind his nails with a Dremel. And so I wanted to show you guys how excited he was about the sight of this Dremel. So I started with a classical conditioning exercise where I just would show him the Dremel and then feed him food, and then show him the Dremel and feed him food, so that he right out of the gate had a positive experience or a positive association. And this was the reaction that I got when the Dremel came out. I just want you guys to see this. He was the bounciest, happiest dog, just like happy to be here. So I don't remember why I reached for him just there. I think I asked him for a touch. So here comes the Dremel, and he's so excited that he jumps up and punches it with his nose. Oh, maybe not that time. He touched it with his nose. But do you see that little like wiggle? So he's super stoked about the sight of the Dremel because he knows it means something good is going to happen for him. And a lot of the time, if we're doing cooperative care exercises with tools, like nail trimmers, or, you know, like a medication bottle or a syringe or whatever, I'll start with that classical conditioning to the sight of the tool, so that as soon as it comes out, they feel good about it, not like, oh, I need to run away from this. So that was just a great example of what we would call conditioned emotional response, meaning that when the Dremel came out, he was like, yes, I love it. And interestingly, both of my dogs have gotten more sensitive. Nico did, and Zip is more sensitive to nail trimming as they got older, because I think it hurts for them to have their joints manipulated when they're a little older and creaky. And I've seen that that's true of dogs with health issues as well. Just basic care can be maybe painful or uncomfortable, or again, just kind of be that trigger stacking phenomenon. And so sometimes you do have to go back and retrain things, handling or care things that you didn't have to in the past, or that you thought you had down in the past. I'm actually going to skip that one. Oh, it's not going to let me skip it. No. Here's an example. So muzzle training is something I think is really important for all dogs, especially dogs who are sensitive to care. So a lot of our pets with health issues can be really sensitive about handling for those reasons that we just talked about, and especially handling in a veterinary context. And so being able to wear a muzzle comfortably is really important. And so I just want to briefly share teaching a dog to wear a muzzle voluntarily. So I've got a couple phases here. And the first was we taught Murphy to stick her nose into the muzzle on cue, or when the muzzle was presented. And we did that by starting with a treat inside the muzzle. And then we removed the treat and she just started sticking her face in on her own. And this is one of the smartest dogs I've ever met. Like, she should actually be probably running the country. She's so smart. And then if we go forward, oh, I don't know why it keeps, my mouse is deciding that sometimes I can click and it'll advance, and sometimes I have to use my keys. So here's kind of the next step in that. So now we're working on duration. So put your face in and hold it there. And see, this isn't being done to Murphy. She's doing it herself. And this is, you know, the same concept that we can use for a variety of different care and husbandry tasks. She is she's shoving her face in that muzzle. So she is not worried about it. She's not anxious about it. She's not reluctant. We're not having to hold her down or force her. She is very willingly doing this on her own. And just for the sake of time, I'll go. Oh, is that the same one? Yeah. Hang on. Sorry, guys. Here we go. So here's that behavior with a significant amount of duration to it. So she's putting her face in the muzzle and holding it there for a couple of seconds, I believe, here in a second. She does a longer one. Yeah. And that'll prepare her for wearing it for longer stretches of time and actually having it buckled on her face. So she puts her face in and actually holds it there. And then mom says, good job, you got your treat. So pretty cool that she can do it herself on her own with no coercion and no forcing. Oh no. Hang on, I have a couple more that I want to show you. Okay, so these are our last few videos. They're real short. This is our trainer Lauren over here and her dog Grayson, and she has taught him to chin rest to get an injection. So this is the final behavior. So this is at our vet clinic in New York with one of our doctors who's going to give him an injection. I think in this first video, she just touches and doesn't actually do the shot. So they're doing a little practice, and then he gets, you don't see it, but he gets his reinforcement right after that for holding his position while the doctor tented the skin. So I want to show you that again. So she's just going to tent the skin like she's giving the shot, and then he gets his treat, which is not on camera. Sorry about that. Oops. Next one, we're going to do the shot. So he's holding position while she gives the shot. Good boy. And then he gets his treat. Okay. And then our last one, second injection on the other side. So she's tenting the skin. And she marks and treats. So that's the finished behavior, what that looks like for an injection. And again, there are lots and lots of examples of cooperative care for different kinds of handling. So for, you know, ear and eye medication administration, for examining teeth, feet, abdomen, tail, whatever. It's basically just about what do you need? What skills do you need the dog to be able, what handling skills do you need the dog to be able to tolerate? But I think that if we can, you know, teach a dog to stand still while we poke something into their skin, that is often one of the harder versions. And so a lot of the other things actually can come significantly easier. All right, there we go. So one thing that I always want to point out is disengagement doesn't mean that you failed. So when you're training this or when you're actually doing the treatment, when your dog goes, oop, no thanks, that doesn't mean they're doing it wrong. And that doesn't mean that you've done it wrong. That's the communication. That's actually really good. I want to see that during the training process, because what that means is the dog understands, oh, I can opt out for a second. I can take a break and I don't have to use aggression to show it. So disengagement isn't failure. That's part of the communication dance. One thing that consultants talk a lot about, modern trainers talk a lot about, and this is from Dr. Susan Friedman, who's actually an applied behavior analyst, is building a trust account. And so the act of teaching cooperative care builds trust between you and your dog, because again, you're saying, tell me what you need, I'm listening to you. You don't have to use big words to say it. You don't have to yell to say it. You can whisper. And that comes through a lot of good experiences and the ratio of good to bad experiences being really high. So for example, Grayson getting the shot there, he might just get one shot a year, but then Lauren is going to practice this behavior with him at home several times a week for the rest of the year. And so most of the time, it's going to be a really pleasant, fun, easy experience for him. And then maybe 1 or 2 times a year, it's going to be harder, but then it goes back to being easy again. And so he starts to trust that the process is going to be easy and rewarding. And for those few times that it isn't, we haven't completely ruined it. And so we always say, deposit more than you withdraw. And what that means is give your dog more good experiences with the behaviors that you need than they have bad experiences. And that will help maintain the behavior over time. And then the other thing I always tell people is don't try to trick your dog. So if you have to give care for a health condition or for husbandry, again, you might be able to trick them into it once. And then that next time they're going to go, aha, I remember what happened last time and I'm not going to fall for it. Fool me once, shame on you. So don't try to trick your dog. Tricking is not the same as distraction. And I know I mentioned earlier, you can distract them. You can give them a plate of squeezed cheese or whatever. That's not like, ooh, I'm going to lure you into this situation and then spring this on you, which will backfire on you. And sometimes there's a fine line between the two. Like it was entirely possible that the next time I pulled out a plate of squeezed cheese, Zip would go, I remember what happened last time you did that squeezed cheese, and I'm not here for that. And that's fine. But I wasn't trying to entrap her into eating the cheese while I forced her to do the nail trimming. She was happy to sit and eat the cheese while I did the nail trimming. So there is a difference, even though sometimes distraction can feel like you're sort of tricking your dog into it. It has to do with, are they still willing to tolerate it? Or are you springing it on them while they're trying to get away? So as you continue practice with cooperative care, what you want to do is train, what we say is train beyond fluency. So it's not enough just to get the behavior one time or a couple of times. You want to get it so well, like with Murphy, where she was shoving her face into the muzzle, or Nico, where he was back flipping when the nail grinder came out. You want to train past the point of fluency. So you want your dog to be able to do it in multiple contexts, on different times of the day, in different areas. You want it to be so fluent that they're like, shut up, I've got this. I've done it 1,000 times, I've got it. So I put this picture of Minnie, a former client of mine, wearing what we call a calming cap or a thunder cap. She lives in downtown Denver and is very reactive to things moving in the environment. And so we use a thunder cap. It's like a fly mask. She can actually see, that's mesh on there, not opaque fabric. And it's used to reduce the visual stimuli that she perceives in the environment. So it's kind of like looking through like dark sunglasses or like gauze. And so she can see things that are close up and really salient, but she can't see things that are far away and less salient. So that lowers the number of times on a walk that she gets triggered. So it keeps her nervous system a little calmer, and the training works better. But I just love this picture because she was like rolling around in the grass and running around and like picking up her ball and like wearing this cap the whole time. She didn't care. So it had become so fluent that she was just doing the other things that she normally does while wearing the cap. And so that's not always going to be, if you're teaching your dog to station, they might not be doing these other things while they're stationing for care. But what the point is, we want them to be able to do it in a variety of different contexts and feel really comfortable doing it. So generalizing the context is part of that. So helping them understand this behavior can happen anywhere. It can happen in the living room, in the backyard, at the park, in the vet's office, wherever we need it, and then practicing regularly. So that's probably the most important part. And that goes back to that ratio of good to bad experiences. So I've got some resources for you guys, and I can have Britt include all of these in the follow-up. But these are just some resources that I pulled from for some of the information. I would say all of these are pretty well-known in the training and behavior world. And I think for any of you who are interested in learning more about any of the concepts in this talk, these are all going to be a really great place to start. So I'll have her send those. Don't feel like you have to furiously write any of them down. If you want to get in touch with us, Behavior Vets offers in-person sessions in New York City, Westchester County, Central and Southern New Jersey, and on the Colorado Front Range from Longmont through Denver down to Colorado Springs. We do in-person sessions. And then we do virtual all over the world. So private sessions, one-on-one, and then we have a lot of webinars and online training, separation anxiety training for dogs, and then professional education for trainers and veterinarians. So those are some ways that you can engage with us online if you want to learn more. Thank you so much. This has been really fun. I love sharing information, and this is something, like I said, I'm really passionate about because at a veterinary practice, a veterinary behavior practice, it comes up often. And this is a crossover and an intersection that we see and deal with really frequently in our patients. So it's something that's always at the forefront of our minds. And I know that it's relevant to a lot of those of you who engage with KarmaSue, because I know you have pets at home that may be experiencing health issues that affect their behavior. So I hope it's been helpful for you as well. We kind of scratched the surface. I did want to mention that we have a free webinar on our website, behaviorvets.com, on cooperative care that dives in a lot more deeply to the principles and the how-tos. So if you're interested in learning more, you can always check that out. And then we do cooperative care private training virtually, again, anywhere in the world, and then in person in those locations that I mentioned earlier. So Thanks so much. And I think it's time for questions if there are some.
Thank you, Ursa. That was amazing. Great information. And I think the
Yeah.
videos really exemplify what you were explaining. So thank you for adding those as well.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So we do have a few moments for questions if you'd like to add them into the chat, or I guess that's the way we'll do it. Add them into the chat. You're welcome to do that. And if you do not have any questions, I'm going to add a survey link into the chat as well. If you could just fill that out, let us know what you thought and what you're looking for in the future. We'd appreciate that. But please utilize your time with Ursa here today to ask some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if anybody has anything that they're curious about, and of course you can always email us at this email that's on the screen right now if you think of something after the fact. I know sometimes I have to like stew on things for a little bit and then questions come up as it sort of sits in my mind a little bit. But oh, Becky said, not a question, but the videos were awesome. We need to work on muzzle training for vet visits, and seeing the video lifted some anxiety. That's so good to hear. I love that, Becky. And I actually have a funny story about that particular dog. She's doing phenomenally well with her muzzle training, but I saw her mom last week and she said, you know, she's doing so well with the muzzle, but when I put it on her, I just get sad because it looks really sad. And so her homework for this week was to go out and buy sparkly things. I have a glue gun and we're going to glue sparkly things all over the muzzle so that when mom puts the muzzle on Murphy and looks at her, she smiles instead of feeling sad. And so we were talking about this and she goes, you're training me, aren't you? And I was like, I sure am. So Murphy within the next week is going to have a nice sparkly muzzle to wear instead of just the basic black Baskerville. So can cats be trained as well? Absolutely. Cats are extremely trainable. When I was the behavior manager at the Dumb Friends League, I was actually at that organization during a time where we were extremely cat focused and we did training with almost every cat in our care every single day. And so in the shelter context, it was less for specific behavior outcomes and more for general stress relief. So training is a good way to relieve stress in animals because it helps them learn, okay, I can use my behavior to control my outcomes, and that makes everybody feel better. But at behavior vets and as a private trainer, I have done a lot of training with cats. We actually have a couple of behavior consultants who specialize in cats. And it is a little bit different because cats, by and large, and I'm making a generalization, there are always individuals that this is not true for, by and large, they're not quite as socially motivated as dogs. And so, you know, we've kind of selected dogs to be like, oh my gosh, tell me what you want me to do. And cats, we haven't really selected for those traits. So it can go, my experience is that it goes a little slower and they can be harder to motivate. So not all cats are as food motivated as dogs. I find that a lot of cats are more motivated by play sometimes. Which is just as good to use in training, but the logistics of it are a little more cumbersome. So you can deliver a treat in a second or two, but if you stop to do a play session for every repetition, it takes more time. And then I find that cats' stamina for training is a little shorter by and large. So with a dog, I mean, I try to keep training sessions really short. And so with a dog, I might do, 5 to 10 minutes of training at a time. And I see my clients for an hour at a time, which is probably too long, but that's just the logistics of, when we meet with clients. With cats, I tend to do like a minute or two at a time, and sometimes even less. So there were some cats in the shelter where we would do, excuse me, 1 or 2 repetitions of behavior and call it a day. And that was all they could handle at that time. But yeah, cats are very, very trainable. You just have to kind of find what motivates them and make sure that you're tailoring the training sessions to kind of optimize their attention span and not and quitting while you're ahead. So leave them wanting more is a good way to think of cat training. But yeah, great question. And most species, again, we see these examples in zoo animals, and I have trained a horse. I had a horse for a while that I trained to ride under saddle. We have a trainer who specializes in horse training, actually. Pretty much, if they have a brain stem and they're motivated by something, you can train them. So I've seen some interesting videos of like goldfish learning to go through obstacle courses and things. Yeah, so we have time for another question or two if anybody has one.
So where is that video of the
Of the what? I'm
fish?
sorry.
Because I would love to see that.
I'll have to find it. I most recently saw it.
Fish.
Oh, I lost you for a second. I'm sorry.
It looks like the connection was a little wonky, but it's back now.
Okay, it's back.
Bars. We're okay.
At least it was in the last 2 minutes of the presentation.
I think we're doing just fine.
We had a really good run.
We did. With all of our preparation. Technology always likes to throw us something, but
always.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys so much. I'm happy to field any other questions. If you want to email info@behaviorvets.com and just put my name at the top. I'm happy to answer any other questions or point you in the direction of more resources or get you set up for training or anything like that. I'm here to help. So
thank you, Ursa, and we will follow up via email to all of the attendees and those that registered but couldn't make it. We'll make sure that you get the recording as well. So please, everyone, thank you, Ursa, for coming. Everyone, thanks for attending, and feel free to reach out to Ursa if you have any needs, or if you'd like to send us an email, we're happy to send you further information as well. So
thank you all so much for your time.
Yes, thank you, Ursa.
Thanks, Britt.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for
coming.
Next time.